Army Airfield in Tuskegee, Alabama. The NAACP, the black press, and others had been lobbying hard for the government to allow African Americans to become military pilots. However, neither the NAACP nor the most involved black newspapers approved the solution of creating separate black units. They believed that approach simply perpetuated segregation and discrimination. Nevertheless, largely at the behest of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a separate unit was created. The Tuskegee base opened on July 19th, and the first class graduated the following March. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Oliver.
This is Tyrone Gethers, Jr., your host of The Source of the Inkwell, live on KUAW, Knowledge, Understanding, and Wisdom. You can check out this broadcast a number of ways. You can hit us up on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and TuneIn Radio. Just type in KUAW and we'll pop right up. On Twitch, Twitter, Facebook Live, and YouTube, you'll be able to actually see the broadcast, too. You can see how handsome I am and what I've done with my hair today. Also, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can call us at 816-599-6893. We can answer all your questions. We can talk about your concerns. If you're interested in doing a show yourself, or if you want to donate, call that number, 816-599-6893. I want to continue my broadcast that I had last time I was here, which is a week ago, radio time. And I was talking about becoming an anti-racist educator. Now, the term anti-racist, we do know that within a school system, the school system has a lot of institutionalized racism. And last week, I was talking about how teachers can continuously become an anti-racist educator. Now, let's break down the definition of anti-racism. Anti-racism is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems. Remember, racism is systematic. Organizational structures, policies, and practices and attitudes so that power is redistributed and shared equitably. And that key word, equitably, is one thing I like to share with my students. They keep saying they want fairness. No, you don't want fairness. You want equability. Equability is what you want. And I want you all to Google homework session for you. I want you to look up the definition of fairness and the definition of equability, and then you decide which one you want. So with being an anti-racist educator, your job is to make your atmosphere, your educational structure within your classroom equitable for your students. So speaking of students, I want to shift my focus to an educator. Now, educators, we must take our role as that position. It's one thing to say that you're an educator. However, it's another thing to actually be an educator. You know, the NAACP has a saying that says, don't talk about it, be about it. And we have a lot of people in our profession that say that they are in our profession, but their actions do not make up what they say. And my educators who are watching, you're probably in a building right now, or you have been in a building in the past that actually showed that. So we have a lot of people that like to play school. And, you know, when you were a kid, someone played the teacher and everyone else played the students. Well, we still have adults to do that right now in school systems. They're actually playing school with our children. So, in taking a role as an educator, we must first assess our own expectations of the ideal student. Now, last week, and although we did the show, we played the same show 2 weeks in a row, it's still last week. So last week, last week we said that if you look in the majority of your enriched classes or advanced classes, you see students who are predominantly white female, with like a white male or two sprinkled in there, and probably a light-skinned black student, or another kid from another race, but you don't see a lot of black boys in there. However, when you go to special ed or behavioral programs, you see a lot of male, predominantly black male students. So already a lot of school systems already have in their minds what the ideal student already is. However, with being an anti-racist educator, and as we assess our role, as we take action in our role as an educator, which means we first must assess our expectation for the ideal student, we must know that racism is often embedded when we make assumptions about what students should be like and what they should know before our class begins. Ooh, I'm gonna put a pin right there. I will repeat that. Racism is often embedded when we make assumptions about what students should be like and what they should know before our classroom begins. Now, I'd spoken to a colleague of mine, and my colleague and I spoke, and we talked about a lot of people who come to schools that are predominantly black or predominantly multicultural, and they come in with this save the world mentality. And in their minds, they think that they can save students and make them a lot better than what they are. Well, our profession is it's more realistic than that. And also you have educators who come in with the assumption that, okay, because I'm in this particular school district or on this particular school building, the expectation is the kids act this way and they should know all of this. Now, first of all, it's always good to have high expectations. I'm not saying don't have high expectations. You're supposed to always have high expectations. However, your expectations must be realistic with the population that you serve. Now, no, I'm not saying the kids in the urban core are bad and they're not bright. No. Some of my highest performing kids were from the urban core. Shout out to the Kansas City, Missouri School District. A lot of my brightest stars came out of that particular school district. A lot of my most triumphant days as an educator came out of that particular school district. So I'm not saying that. I'm saying that sometimes in our minds we have preconceived notions. And I remember D.L. Hughley said that some of the one of the worst places you can be is in the mind of the oppressor, is a stereotype in the mind of the oppressor. I know I'm kind of changing it up a little bit, but that's pretty much what we're saying. And we can't walk into a classroom thinking the kids should be a certain way, and then when they don't fulfill that expectation, we're treating them negatively. So we need to have realistic expectations that are based on our students. Set the bar high for all your students, not just students based on their complexion. Now, I know last week a lot of our viewers was hitting us up on the Facebook feed. Mr. Walker, is there any way I can see the Facebook feed on the screen that I'm looking at right here? Okay. Okay, cool. So if anyone pops up on there, we'll address it. 'Cause last week we had some very strong commentary, and please, comment on the feeds or call 816-599-6893. Or if you have my personal cell phone number, text me. So we can discuss this. So also, we also need to enact their meeting. Enact the students' meeting with us. Make yourself approachable, because sometimes teachers make themselves as if they are above a student conversation. Now, come on. Back in the day when we were kids, we thought our teachers were inhuman, that they didn't realize or feel what we felt. I remember someone asked, said, Tyrone, how do you reach kids? I said, well, I let kids see that I'm human. I make myself approachable. So make yourself approachable for the student to come and talk to you. Also, you must have a situation of the student's notion in regards to their capacity to self-discipline. Self-discipline is key. So how can that student manage themselves within your classroom according to your management style? And is it equitable for them to be able to learn like every other student based on their needs? Also, we must assess the content in our courses. Also, advising and training programs. Now, teachers, when you come into your classroom, no one is saying you must be the end all, the be all on your content. However, you must have a strong grasp and a strong expertise on what you're teaching. Also, you're advising. How are you advising students to navigate through your content and navigate through the educational system in your school building? And also, what training programs are you looking for in your school building or outside of your building to make you a better teacher for your students? Now, what we believe to be the core of our discipline and our best practices as advisors and the sense of our organizational schema, that's what we already know about organization, all have to be integrated as they likely carry legacies of racism and colonialism. Think about that. What we're saying is, think about what you're teaching the students. Think about how you're trained as a teacher. Think about how you are groomed to adhere to student needs. How is this rooted in colonialism and institutionalized racism? Well, I know that a lot of students, when they go to their history classes or social studies classes, what is their take on their native country or their native continent or their native place of origin or religion? Now, based on the system in the United States, we have a lot of students who feel or who think that their history started with slavery. Every student of color in this country, every student of African descent is not of slavery. Now, of course, slavery is not the beginning of our history. It interrupted it, but it was definitely not the beginning. I also look at our students who are of Mexican descent. Think about what they're being taught about their people. Now, I have students right now, we sit up here, and there are two things we don't celebrate. We don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo, because that's not Mexican independence, and we definitely don't celebrate Taco Tuesday. So when people say that stuff in our classroom to our Mexican students, we're like, we don't do that. Also, with our Asian students too, we don't lump everyone in one particular group. So I want you to actually sit and analyze what it is that you're teaching. Now, and I'm a video game head, and I was playing Call of Duty years ago when it first came out. And one of the characters said, "Truth is written by the victor." So what am I saying here? Whoever won, or whoever took over, or whoever colonized writes the curriculum. So you need to think about it. Is what I'm teaching, how I'm behaving, is it based on a colonialistic version or lens? Because when you look at American history, the United States of America is seen as the good guy every time. As a student, your country is seen as the good guy every time. But when you become an adult and become more knowledgeable, you see that your country makes mistakes too. Like, for example, we were talking about the Holocaust, and students thought that only Jews were in the Holocaust. I'm sorry, inside the death camps. No, you had people who were Slavic descent. You had LGBTQ+. You had Jewish people. You had Romanies, and you had African Americans. Yes, you had African Americans in those death camps. And the students looked at me like, "Why we didn't know that?" I said, "Yeah, because they're not teaching you that. Just like we're not teaching. We're teaching kids that people of African descent stayed in Africa. No, there's evidence of people of African descent all over this world. You have pyramids in the United States. You have pyramids in North America. How do you think it got there? You got hieroglyphics in the Grand Canyon. It didn't get there by email or by Twitter. No, they traveled. The Olmec statues down in Mexico. I'm sorry, are in Mesoamerica. How to get there. You have, what else? A good chunk of the United States was Mexico. But they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about the real manifest destiny. They don't want to talk about how they drove Native women out of their villages by doing inhuman things to babies. They don't want to talk about that. Every book that you've read in class in regards to the history of this country, it's been in a colonial sense. We look good. Now, I told my students colonialism is two things. And really, to be quite honest, colonization is the same exact, or is a child of imperialism. One of two things happens. One, we wipe out everything about you and put us there. Or two, we like that. We're going to adopt it as our own. For example, look at Roman mythology. All Roman mythology is a remix of Greek mythology, and all Greek mythology is an imitation of Egyptian mythology. Do your research. Like that one guy to be on Facebook. Look it up. So, we're saying that you got to ask yourself, what do I already know? And what I already know, is it rooted in these practices? I went to a particular school district, and this school district was not used to having an influx of black students. So a high-ranking official in this district said, well, I didn't know what to do with all these people coming up here, coming up in our district. What am I supposed to do with that? And I'm sitting up here like, wow, she really said that? And my answer was, educate them. Just because a student looks different doesn't mean that they don't have the capacity to learn. As long as you have life in your body, you have the capacity and the ability to learn. So look at where your training comes from. Like, for example, I know I'm digging up something that was buried, but if you look at Lee Summit School District, they had a superintendent who wanted to have a diversity training for the district, and people were up in arms about that. They were pissed about that. And I actually saw some comments in regards to what some of the people in the community were saying. Now, a good friend of mine said that his sister lives out in Lee Summit, and they think Lee Summit is God's gift on earth. Well, the residents in your God's gift on earth was pretty much saying that these people need to know how we do things if they want to live here. That was one resident. Another resident said, well, our test scores went down when those people came out here. I'm like, whoa, and now this is on government social media pages. People in the community are saying things like this about people who look like me. Yeah, you got to look how people are. And sometimes we are willingly ignorant in regards to replicating and duplicating the behavior with our own. Because see, sometimes the oppressor don't need to get in your face and tell you how they feel about you or do things to you. No, they'll find someone to look just like you to do it too. And that's what they're doing in these school systems. They are putting people who look like you in the classroom, and you have this agenda to teach that's really discriminating these kids. That prison the pipeline's real. Got kids walking in lines, standing at attention, and you're monitoring. I mean, it's really, parents really look at your kids' schools, and if it looks like a prison, you might want to say something about that. All right, next one. Employee, that's the whole show by itself. I might do a teacher table talk on that. So I got some code names of some teacher friends of mine. Girl next door, Cuzzo, young rookie around the corner, and my man Coach. We need to sit down and talk about this right here. All right, next one. Employ evidence-based anti-racist pedagogy. Pedagogy is your philosophy of teaching. Now, there are many robust pedagogical approaches for organizing your teaching and ensuring that you are ready to engage in difficult discussions. Now, first thing that comes to mind, there's a book. I think it's a good book. I think it's a book that every kid needs to read by the time they're in 8th or 9th grade. And Mr. Walker, you probably know about this book too. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Now, Harper Lee is so cold with it. She really only wrote 2 books and co-authored another book, but the first book she wrote set her for life. If you're not familiar with To Kill a Mockingbird, it's through the eyes of a young lady named Scout, Jean Louise Finch, that's her real name, and her daddy, Atticus Finch. She's watching her dad go through an actual trial in regards to defending a black man who was wrongfully accused of raping a white woman. Now, that's the gist of the book. And also, the book also goes through a lot of things too, classism, sexism, gender inequality, all that kind of good stuff too. However, the main focus was that trial. That was the climax of the book. And I remember telling the kid, he said, man, that Atticus Finch was down. I said, oh, really? I said, if you really, really read the book, Atticus wasn't as down as you thought he was. And if you read the sequel, you find out how he really was. But anyway, I feel that that book is very relevant to this day based on what black men go through. One of my colleagues, who's a white woman, she said, white tears have power, and people need to realize that. And when she said that, the kids were like, wow, that makes sense. Because think about it. I mean, pretty much what she was saying, just like in this book, all a white woman had to do was cry and say he did something, and they were ready to kill the man. Now, right there, that book in itself, what I just said, would fuel very, very, very uncomfortable discussions. Teachers, we got to stop saying, I don't feel comfortable saying that. or I don't feel comfortable talking about that. Now, if it's something that holds your job in jeopardy or something's inappropriate, that's fine. But if it deals with something that challenges the way that you were raised or taught, or challenges the system, the racist system, oh no, you gotta discuss that, because those kids, they're starting to be enlightened. Let them challenge the system. I actually work with people who will sit up there and say, oh, I don't discuss that stuff. Wow, so you don't discuss the stuff that will open up enlightenment to change the system to make the educational playing field more even. The fact that you're keeping your mouth shut is the problem. The fact that you're keeping your mouth shut, you are a willful agent in the destruction of your students. Because last time I checked, your job is to make those students better 7th graders or 8th graders than you were at that age. And the fact that you're keeping your mouth shut because they're challenging a racist system or a racist idea because you don't feel comfortable talking about it, you're in on it. You're in on it. Silence is violence. Keeping quiet, being neutral, you really reveal your side being neutral. Same thing, when you have teachers who say things that are inappropriate in these manners too. And it actually feeds the fire to it. Now, difficult discussions need to be engaged, because the more uncomfortable we get, the more large our scope is, the more we learn. You cannot learn anything in your house. You already know it. In order to learn more, step outside on the front porch. Then step out on the sidewalk. Then go next door. Then go across the street. Then go around the corner. That's how you enlarge yourself. That's how you enlarge your scope. So teachers, when you sit up here and a student asks a question about certain things, now, if it's inappropriate, then you tell them it's inappropriate. But if it's challenging the system, let them challenge the system, especially if the system is designed to hurt them and kill their academic decline, which will in turn kill their mental decline, which will ultimately kill their physical decline. I'm sorry. I'm saying decline. Let me repeat that. If you keep your mouth shut, you are killing their educational ascension, which will in turn kill their mental ascension, which will ultimately kill their physical ascension. So my apologies for that mix-up. So when you keep your mouth shut and not say certain things, you are actually digging a hole to push that kid down in there and bury them for life. Also, a discussion came out. We have people who don't want to use To Kill a Mockingbird in the curriculum. I think the book should be used. And one teacher said, well, it says the N-word in it. Okay, well, then you educate. See, that's our problem. We're so quick to take stuff away instead of educating why something shouldn't be used. It's one thing to say, don't say that, but it's another thing to educate why it should not be say that. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say this, and I know my girl's watching. A lot of people who don't want to teach that, they probably say the same word behind them kids' backs. And you and I both know that some of them teachers probably might say that word in front of them kids. Yeah, I said that. Oh, I definitely said that. One of my biggest issues is when you got teachers who don't correct students on saying the N-word. I had a teacher tell me a little while back, oh, I don't discuss not saying the N-word with black students. I said, why not? Well, I feel it's not my place because they use it all the time. I said, no, black kids don't use it all the time as much as you think you do. And then she said, what I want to say is, I tell a white kid not to say it to a black kid, but I won't tell a black kid not to say. I said, no, what you just said right there was extremely racist. You're being discriminatory on who you educating in regards to this stuff. And right there, you're telling me where your mindset is. That the reason why you don't say things to certain kids is because you feel that's who they are. I've had an administrator tell me that black students say that to each other because it's common speech and that's how they see each other. This is an educator saying this. So this whole piece, this whole book can stretch outside of the pages of the book. And that's the problem. We have teachers in these situations who have that colonialistic way of thinking that they don't want students to be educated past the stereotype. And that's a problem. We don't educate kids past the stereotype because we're comfortable with that kid being that N-word in our mind. We're comfortable with that kid being stupid in our mind. The reality of what the kid can be scares certain teachers. Therefore, we keep it locked. We don't open up that door for the student to grow. That's another show topic right there, too. Okay, next, still rolling, moving right along. We have make a concrete and actionable plan to change. Ooh. 4 key strategies that we can go through right now to make this action take place. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to be about it. Racism is often embedded when we make assumptions about what students should be like, what they should know before class begins, and what compartment they should enact in their meeting with us, and the notions about their capacities of self-discipline. So right there, we need to get the racism out. It's kind of like weeds in the garden. My mother has a green thumb, and when she does her gardening, she plucks all the weeds out. Racism is the weeds that's in the garden of education. You got to pull that stuff out. You got to reprogram yourself. What in my curriculum, what in our policy is rooted in racism? I got to get rid of that. Because a lot of kids, see, students are smarter than what we give them credit for. I had a teacher in a building where I worked. Man, this dude had a Confederate flag hanging up in the classroom. The kids said, man, why he got that up in his classroom? And the kids were like, yeah, he talking about he teaches Civil War. He said, but he don't teach it every year. It don't need to be up there all day. Get that stuff down. Another school building I worked in, they had black men in chains being enslaved. Kids said, look at this. This is in our school building. Why is it there? I mean, you're giving a timeline in the world, and you got your timeline starting off with black folks being enslaved. Yeah, kids are more woke than what we give them credit for. Let me turn this down. All right. Also, we also need to know that, every student's not the same. Every kid's not going to be that bright-eyed, alert, attentive, all-A student. Lottie Lawrence, may she rest in peace, was a woman who gave me one of my first jobs in education. And she said students are cars. And she said they may all leave the starting line, but they all get to the finish line at different times. So we shouldn't expect every car to get to the finish line at the same time. Each student is different. You said we got chat?
Can you see it?
No, I can't see it. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, chat is live. Yes, right, keeping your mouth shut. Okay, cool. So we're saying that is, we can't have the expectation that kids all need to learn at the same exact time. No, at the end of your unit, you're going to have a good chunk of kids that probably still might not even know the content. So what are you doing to make sure every kid gets it? Every kid. Not just the ones that sit in the front, not just the ones that sit in the back, not the ones that are awake, every kid. Another thing, too, teachers, I'm going to say this. Teachers, stop allowing students to sleep in your classroom. If you are teaching content, those students need to be awake. If those kids are staying asleep in your classroom, the expectation is, I'm not going to bother them. Now, keep in mind, if the kid has a legit issue on why they're sleeping, then you deal with that with the administration, but don't allow kids to sleep in your classroom because they're missing out. Now, I've walked up and down school buildings before, and I've seen kids sleeping, and teachers just didn't even say, hey, can you wake up? Or calling home, hey, kids sleep in class, what can we do to make the kid better? We have parents that we have teachers who are afraid of kids and afraid of kids' parents. There's nothing wrong with addressing a behavior. Now, if that parent or that kid gets, sideways, then that's when you call on your administrator to help out. But not saying something? Nah, man, that's right there. You already got in your mind that kid's not even worth your time. If I was a principal, man, look, I bet not see no kids sleep in no one's classroom. All right. We also said that we feel the kids should know certain things. Well, that's why you do your pre-test or have a pre-test, post-test, have a discussion on schema, what the kids know, or have a survey. I mean, you shouldn't automatically assume that every kid knows 3 times 3 when they come into your math class their second grade year. Or automatically assume, and I made the mistake too, I still do on occasions, that we automatically assume the kids know certain things. Like, they don't. I mean, we don't know where they came from or what class they came from. Or even if we know the classroom or the teacher, we're not in there with that teacher teaching all the time. So we don't know. And if we don't know, we can't say. So we're saying that we need to do our own assessment on what the student knows. That's what we do. Don't beat up a kid for not knowing certain things or berate a child for not knowing what 3 times 3 is. You don't know. Maybe the kid was out of school, especially this whole pandemic year that we had last year. Those kids don't know. Kids been out of school for a year and a half. And a lot of them, with the whole Zoom thing, they can just turn the camera off. All right? So we're saying that we shouldn't have this automatic expectation. Now, assumption. Now, we should have a high expectation. What are we doing to get the kid there? But at the same time, we should automatically assume that the kid should know what they should be doing. Okay. Let's see. Also, how we meet with students. First of all, is the door open for the kid to communicate with you? Does a student know, hey, I can go to Mr. Walker and talk to him? His door is always open. I know when his playing period is. When Mr. Walker, when I email Mr. Walker, he emails me right back within 24 to 48 hours. He calls home. Are you making yourself available and accessible for your students? Are you? Are students comfortable to talk to you? Do students feel comfortable doing this? Are you all watching? Okay. And if you're not able to watch, what I'm doing is raising my hand. Are students comfortable to do that in your classroom? Okay? That's it could be that simple. And then eventually you will have students come up to you talking to you about, more complex things or more personable things. Okay? Let's see. Self-discipline. How are kids able... Now, before I say that, kids will model their self-discipline off of what they see adults do first. If you have strong classroom management, then your student will then in turn have strong self-discipline. In my classroom, right now, I'm doing differentiated instruction. My students are educating themselves based on concepts that I teach them prior on in the week. We have our lesson, and then they're on their own. And then they have check-ins with me. Now, that's the way it works for me. I'm not saying everyone should do what I do. No, you do what's best for you. However, I do say that every teacher needs to have strong classroom management. If you have strong classroom management, your students will govern themselves based on how you handle your business. If you're unorganized, your students will be unorganized. If you don't come to work, your students will either not come to work or not care what you teach. If you are messy, come on now, we got some teachers who are worse than the kids, chatty and starting drama. What you think your kids are going to do? So when it comes down to it, your students are a reflection of you. Just like how a child is a reflection of that parent, a student is a reflection of that teacher. You can walk up in that classroom and look at the students. That will tell you how that teacher is. So your classroom management dictates the kids. So if I hear teachers say, man, these kids is wild, what are you? How's your management style? How does your management style endorse that? Wow. Okay. 1, 2, 3. All right. Working to process our biases crucially changes our ability to be effective teachers. We did a PD one time. We had some teachers to say, oh, I don't have bias. No, I don't have that. Everyone has bias. We talked about that last week. Here, we're going to go ahead and do it again for you. Mr. Walker, what's your favorite ice cream?
Let's say butter pecan.
Butter pecan. Mr. Walker, who's your favorite superhero?
Daredevil.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dang. All right. Yeah. He was smooth. Mr. Walker, what's your favorite day of the week?
Monday.
Oh, wow.
Thursday, God.
Now, as you can see, he has a bias. That's his bias. His favorite superhero is Daredevil. His favorite ice cream is butter pecan. His favorite day of the week, surprisingly, is Monday. Now, that's his bias. Bias means what you lean towards. So if Mr. Walker went to Comic-Con and I was with him, hey man, they got Daredevil, the comic book section over there. He's gonna lean towards that. Me, Black Panther. But anyway, that's my bias. My bias is what I like and what I lean towards. So for someone to say that they're biased, that they don't have bias, they bias is lying. They lean towards lying over truth. Everyone has a bias. Now, is there anything wrong with that? No. No. And if you don't believe me about bias, look who you're married to. That's who you lean towards. That's your preferred choice, right? Everyone's biased. Now, where bias is a problem is if your bias is oppressing someone else. For example, if someone says, I lean towards men over women. So I give boys preferential treatment over girls. Or I prefer Christians over any other religion. Or I prefer white over black. That's bias. That's a form of bias too. So for someone to say they don't have bias, they have a bias for lying. They lie over truth. That's what they're doing. So everyone has a bias. However, you must make sure that your bias does not feed into discrimination and racial injustice. And so you got to look into that. Because right now, we have a lot of biases going on right now that are really holding a lot of kids back who are in oppressed groups, and teachers back who are in oppressed groups. I had a principal come to me, and she said she wanted to groom me to be an administrator. Didn't work. I mean, she immediately turned her back on me and favored a white male over me, and threw it up in my face every chance she had. That was her bias. Her bias was towards the messy guy, the messy person, the person that started stuff. I mean, I don't mean to sound bitter about that, but I mean, it is what it is. Now, how we doing on time? Excellent. We recommend the inclusive pedagogy to. Oh, okay, never mind. All right, let's go back to my notes. We also need to show an understanding of an equity-minded analysis. So I want you to do an analysis of your school building. Is it equity? Is there equity all through there? Do you see negative biases or biases? Do you see preferential treatment? Do you see a racist agenda? What do you see? And if it's not equitable, what can you do to fix it? How can you make sure that every student has an equitable chance to be educated, and every teacher has an equitable chance to educate? Now, it goes back on the teachers, too. Now, you have teachers who want to do an anti-racist agenda. Are they allowed to do it, or are there obstacles? I mean, I went to school before, and I said, what do y'all do for Black History Month? And they said, we don't do that here. I had to change that, because you're going to celebrate culture. You're definitely going to celebrate culture in these school buildings with these kids. If the child does not see themselves, it's an issue. Where it takes a village to raise a child, I got to quote my sister Lene. She comes on right after me. Dope show. Check her out. She said, if that child is not embraced by the village, that child will burn the village down to feel warmth. And that's what kids are doing. Kids are striking that match because they are not feeling warmth. I guarantee you, a good chunk of your students who are having behavioral concerns are having behavior issues because they are not feeling included. They are experiencing the wrath of your racist agenda. They're feeling that. They are not healthy. They are not being structured. They are not they are not themselves. They don't feel like they have a voice. They don't feel comfortable doing this in the classroom because they was told not to. And what they have to say is stupid or it's not applicable. So teachers got to really, really analyze that. And we also got to recognize that students are no different than their peers. And when I say peers, students in this school building and that school building and that district and that state over there, there's no difference. They have the same cognitive capacity. They have the same capacity to learn. Like I told the staff where I'm teaching right now, that school segregation still exists. It exists based on the zip code, because there are certain things that we have in our school system that other school systems don't, and vice versa. And parents and teachers, don't allow your central office staff to tell you we don't have any money. If you're making more money than the President of the United States, or you have people in your school district who have positions and you don't know what they do, they have money. It's being utilized in the wrong way. If you have school buildings that are falling apart, if you have resources that are lacking, but you have money that's disappearing, you have issues. I mean, you have money in your school district. Now, you have a lot of teachers who leave school districts. Going back to those teachers with the save the world mentality. Same teachers that say, I'm here to save the world. I'm here to give these black children an educational experience that they need. But then when those kids show that, hey, we're a challenge, what do? You leave and go to whiter pastures. Because what are you saying? That white students have a stronger capacity of learning than black students. No, they don't. No, every child has the same capacity to learn. They do. How you get there is different, but every child has the same capacity to learn. And of course you're gonna say, well, Tyrone, I don't agree with you. Man, look, I can drop names if need be, if I'm allowed to, which I'm not. But yeah, there are a lot of teachers I work with throughout the years that found it a challenge educating black students. And now they're out in your Raymores and your Beltons and your Grain Valleys and your Lee Summits. That's where they're going. That's in the Kansas City area. I don't know about other cities, but I know in our area, they're going to whiter pastures, North Kansas City, all that. So they won't deal with it. But last time I checked, you got problems everywhere you go. That's one thing my parents taught me. Nowhere is perfect. On this earth, you have problems everywhere you go. So you're exchanging one problem for another one, or for several, all because you feel that black kids can't learn. All right, go ahead and deal with that. So, also, in and outside of the classroom, education is not just in your classroom. Utilize outside sources. For example, KUAW Radio has a broadcast program in 2 schools right now. So kids are learning about communication arts through KUAW, through the radio. So teachers, administrators, district personnel, if you're listening, if you want an outside resource to assist you in conducting practice with communication arts, hit up 816-599-6893 and ask to speak to Mr. George Walker. He will set you up. Every once a month, you have RMS Radio, students in Raytown Middle School, learning communication arts live on the radio. So it's learning outside of the walls. Let the community assist you, because it does take a village. The community can assist you in educating students. Like that plug I did there. Also, utilize your museums and your volunteers. My son's school, the principal told me, said, yes, we have volunteers that come in all the time. Yes, he said the people that do morning drop-off, who manage that, who manage evening pickup, bus monitoring, class monitoring, they're all volunteers. So think about that. Get volunteers to come in that are outside of the community. Like, also tap into your museums and your community centers and your religious institutions. We have Ramadan coming up. Hey, you have a lot of students that are Muslim. Have someone come in from a mosque and discuss that with the staff and students. Culturally, you might get something from that. I'm not saying change your religion, no, but culturally, you might learn something. Let's see, what else? Let's see. Show promise in helping students to regain cognitive resources to be successful in college or trade school. So let them know that, hey, look, the learning does not stop in my classroom. You can get you a good job when you leave school, go to college and learn to get a good job and have debt. Trade school. Let's see, trade school. Let's see, what else? Then also you have military. These are all good things to assist in having students make things happen. So with saying that, give kids the capacity to learn outside of the classroom and beyond. So with saying that, that's my time. And, kind of keep in mind that make sure that your educational atmosphere is equitable for all students to learn, because all students have the ability and the need to learn. This is Tyrone Gethers Jr. You have been watching the source of the Inkwell. In the Inkwell, education overflows like ink. Let it stay permanent. God bless. See you next time.